Welcome to Yoga Biz Camp with myself, Michael J. I'm a yoga business coach with 25 plus years of experience as a creative, a total tech geek, and a yoga business owner. Today I have Mitch McGinley, and we're going to talk about 2021. Is it a good year to buy or sell a yoga studio? Mitch is a business broker in the wellness space and a certified mind-body business consultant. Sidebar, we had some tech issues with an echo, but it is great content. Welcome to Yoga Biz Camp. I'm Michael J, and my guest today is Mitch McGinley. Mitch is a business broker, consultant, and advisor specializing in the health and wellness industry. Mitch began his career as an operations manager with Omni Hotels and went on to become general manager of a boutique hotel in Little Italy, one of my favorite places, best market ever, elevating it to become the highest rated hotel in San Diego on one of the world's largest booking sites. He eventually left the hotel industry to pursue his dream of owning a yoga studio with his wife, Carson. Together, they owned and operated Happy Yoga Center for 6 years. During that time, Mitch became a mind-body certified business consultant, engaging with hundreds of wellness businesses from all over the world. After successfully selling Happy You, Mitch was moved to help other business owners sell. He became a CA licensed business broker working for First Choice Business Brokers in San Diego. Mitch has a master's degree in business and is passionate about helping entrepreneurs achieve their biggest payday. And his website, he can be found at healthandwellnessbusinessbroker.com. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I met Mitch on the consulting program at MindBody Online. And I have to say, Mitch, out of all the consultants, you were probably the most generous with your information. Like, I really, really appreciated how you just truly wanted to share and help other people become good consultants. So I want to say thank you for that. You were very, very just generous in really wanting to share your knowledge and your experience with other people.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's honestly, I love teaching. I love helping other people however I can. Um, and that consultant program is relatively new and is going through some changes, I think, but it's easy to help people who want to be helped. And
Mm.
you were one of those people that rose to the top and asked a lot of great questions. And so I'm grateful for you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I did ask a lot of questions. Um, uh,
Best way to learn.
so, so tell me a little bit about your journey to opening your studio with your wife. Was that was in San Diego, right?
It was, yeah, in
Yeah.
Ocean Beach. It was always a dream of ours. My wife's mom, Jan St. John, owned and operated a fitness, including yoga studio, for the past 30 plus years. So my wife Carson grew up with it, and she got to, grow up with a parent who owned a small business, and she got to go and participate and started teaching classes from a young age as a teenager even. Um, and my wife's a phenomenally talented performer, artist, dancer, singer, yoga teacher. Um, it's easy to do stuff with her, and so it was just a dream that we always had. You know, when I worked in hotels, I worked extraordinarily long hours, and we wanted to have a family. And so we just felt like the dream was to have our own small business. And luckily, the opportunity presented itself perfectly. It was our favorite yoga studio. It was where we practiced. The owner approached us about buying it, and
So it was
we did it.
established. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was established. It had been around for like 10 years. And we had said something to her before. It was like 3 years before. We just dropped this little hint. We are like, hey, if you ever think about selling, let us know. Like we'd never want to compete with you. We'd never want to open another studio in OB. Like, but if you wanted to leave, we'd be really interested in
Mm.
in taking over. And we never spoke about it again. And 3 years later, she called us out of the blue and said, "Hey, I'm ready to sell, and I want to sell to you." And luckily, at that moment, I was kind of mad at my boss at work, and it just made sense. And we, her parents believed in us enough to let us borrow the money to purchase it. And it turned out great. We paid
And
them
do you
back on
bel
time and ended up selling it for a decent amount more.
and do you believe that your business knowledge helped that business going into it?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah,
I mean, the number one thing that I learned from Omni Hotels that I'm most grateful for is customer service.
yeah, yeah,
And I feel like that's always been one of my strengths as a person. And that's why I was the guest services manager. Like I was the person that they'd shove out in front of the angriest customers to try and make them happy. And that's very different in a hotel than a yoga studio, right? Like you work in a hotel, like some things can go terribly wrong. Um, Yoga studios, not so much. But simple things like adding a person at the desk to do the check-ins instead of asking the teachers to do it, and
right.
responding to emails and having a little bit better pricing strategy, things like
Yeah,
that are just kind of basic,
systems.
but unless you do it and do it well, it's gonna show.
Yeah. Did you know, because I mean, I'm a big believer in putting systems in place. That was probably one of the operational successes I had with my business and what I'm seeing with what I'm helping other studios do as well. Did you already know what those systems were, or did you kind of learn as you went along? Or were they given to you by the previous owner?
Well, it depends on which system. So when it comes to something like accounting, I brought that with me.
Yeah, yeah,
When it comes to something like mind body or marketing emails or even to a degree pricing strategy, like there was a decent amount of learning that needed to
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
And luckily places like mind body, I mean, going to MBU, which
yeah.
is Mind Body University, and spending a weekend listening to experts was actually really critical in our success.
Yeah, I agree with that. I went to Mind Body Bold conference and I came away with, oh, there are people with business mindsets in this. Because I think when I first started, like a lot of studios, I ran it on gut instinct for the longest time. Luckily, I had good gut instincts and I also had a marketing background, which really helped. But as far as the business things, I think until I went to that conference, I didn't really realize that you could actually make a business out of it. It took me a little while to figure that out.
It's true. And honestly, what I've come to realize that I share with everyone is that everything is business. You know,
Yeah,
there's nothing that's not business. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to support yourself, whether you even if you do it purely for trade, like you still have to work out a deal where you're able to sustain yourself. And so it's everything in life comes back to some of those sort of basic business principles. And it's for some reason I feel like the yoga industry in particular has this aversion to business or
yeah, yeah,
making money or something along those lines, and that's just silly. Um, you have to be able to pay the bills for it to be sustainable, and so if you can't sustain yourself and the business, it's never going to work. And it doesn't matter how foo-foo you want to be in terms of offering yourself and everything to the world for free, and you have to be able to take care of yourself. And so
yeah. I just went through before this call. I was on a call with a yoga studio, and the last call we had was me making her do what she hadn't wanted to do, which was dive into her numbers, and because the numbers don't lie. And so today was a very different call after really truly looking at those numbers, and that's the real picture of the business, right? So it can be eye-opening, and I'm finding a lot of people go through just wanting to pay enough, just pay my way, instead of building something profitable and sellable eventually. So I had to talk with another consultant the other day, Terry Fry, who she said that when she opened her studio, she opened it with an exit plan in mind, knowing that she was going to sell it one day, which she recently did through you, with you. And so I thought that was such a great thing that because she came into it that because mindset most people don't.
That's correct. And
Yeah,
if I'm a huge fan of the Seven Habits of Highly Successful People.
yeah,
If you've ever read that book, there's an eighth now, I guess. But one of them is begin with the end in mind,
yeah,
and it's the right way to begin. And some of my favorite conversations are when I come to meet a business owner and they say to me, "Well, I want to sell in 2 years or 3 years," and we actually have time to make some meaningful changes that are going to really change the trajectory of their valuation.
yeah,
Because if you get a couple of years of runway, you can really make some decisions to make your financials look different. Um, and one of the things, I'll go ahead and say this and share this. I want everyone to know this. Um, when you're looking to sell your business, it's counterintuitive from how most small business owners file their tax returns. Sorry, let me back that up a little bit. Most small business owners write off every expense that they possibly can. And that's smart. It's part of being a smart small business owner. It's a reason to own your own small business. You can write off your car and your cell phone and your meals and your continuing education and your travel, like that yoga retreat in Belize. Like, yeah, that was a
yeah,
business expense, with the goal of showing no profit so that you don't have to pay any taxes. The problem is that when you go to sell, somebody's going to be looking at your taxes to see how much money you made. And if you don't have anything to show, it makes it a lot harder to sell, or you won't be able to sell for as much. And the number one way to really get a lot out of a sale is to have your business pre-qualify for an SBA loan. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is if you show enough profit to support a debt payment for that loan. And so what I mean is, if you want to sell for $300,000 one day, someone needs to be able to go to a bank and get a loan from the SBA for $300,000 so that they can buy your business. But it's not just the person that has to qualify, it's the person and the business.
mm,
And so if the business doesn't show enough profit to pay both the owner and to pay the monthly debt payment on that $300,000 loan, you're not going to be able to get an SBA loan. And that immediately is going to make it way more difficult to sell your business because you're going to have to find somebody with cash. And there just aren't a lot of cash buyers in the yoga industry.
so that would mean for some studio owners, and we know that this happens, is that they have little deals with people. Oh, pay me cash and put that in my pocket. That's quite a common thing. Oh, don't pay tax. Let's just keep this between us. But that ends up as not showing as sales in the records, and you need to have your records showing that you're making money.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
just like buying a house. It's like you, um, the same thing. It's like when you write off everything that you possibly can in your life, you go to get a mortgage and they're like, wait a minute, you didn't make a whole lot of money last year. You're like, no, but I did. I just hit it well. And they're like, oh, well,
yeah.
that's too bad. So it's just one of those things that comes back to bite you.
Yeah.
That when you can plan for it, at least you know. And then it's like, okay, well, I've taken advantage of all of those write-offs and everything for however many years, but now I'm 2 years away from selling. And so I'm going to commit to showing as much profit as humanly possible for the next 2 years, bite the bullet, pay the taxes, and expect that I'll get a multiple of the
Yeah.
tax expense back.
When you sold your studio, was that what took you on this path of becoming a broker in the health and wellness field then?
Yeah, it was cool the way that it happened. The company here, First Choice Business Brokers, kept reaching out to me. And Allison, our office manager, is fantastic at this. But she knew that I was trying to sell, and she knew that I was trying to do it myself. Um, and she just very calmly, like once a month or like every other month, be like, "Hey, just checking in. How's it going?" And I kept being like, "I got it. I got it. I don't need your help. Thank you. I'm
Mm.
good." And luckily, like I had been through this several times. Part of kind of what I did with hotels was buying and selling with a commercial real estate broker, and I felt pretty confident. And not a lot of people have that, but I told them, I was like, if it doesn't work out with this buyer that I have in my back pocket, then I will call you and you can list it publicly and we can go through what I do now. But luckily it all worked out. And so when she reached out to me, like right after we had sold the studio, she was like, "Well, congratulations. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. What are you going to do now?" And I was like, I was going to take a year off and kick it and,
I took
picturing
two.
like frozen cocktails. Yeah. It's worked so hard for so long. It's like, I'm going to take a vacation, for a long time. And, of course that did not happen. Um, Literally 2 weeks after we sold the studio, and she was like, "Well, send me your resume and we'd love to talk to you about doing this on a more regular basis." And I laughed into the phone. I was like, "My resume." Um, and so I was like, "Okay, well, this will be a good exercise. Like I'll update my resume and go do a job interview. Like this will be funny." And I went in and I met with the guys who are now my group, and I loved them. They're all wonderful people. We're all same age. Our kids are the same age. And it's, we're independent contractors. So technically I don't have a boss. I'm allowed to work as much or as little as I want. And that has been incredibly helpful, especially in a year like the past year that we've had. Um, but yeah, so they recruited me, and I went and got licensed. It took me a couple months to get my license. And then I officially started in, I guess it was June of 2019. So coming up on 2 years now.
And I think in the mind body world in particular, you're the go to guy for buying and selling. I think you've really carved out a niche there in this industry. And I think you've carved out trust as well with people. And I know when I sold my studio, I wish I had somebody like you. I did it solo, and it would have been so nice to have a buffer person in between me and the buyers. And I had two potential buyers when I wasn't looking at selling. And I found that to be the most emotional process to go through because it's like being, I mean, you're basically being grilled on your business. And I mean, luckily I had all the bookkeeping intact and ready to show. But each person that was interested in buying my business had different requests. Like they had, different financial needs. So it's like both times it's like you felt like you're starting the whole process from scratch. You thought you had all the information there. So basically I did it with myself and my lawyer. And anyway, I ended up not selling. The one person that was so close, she came in and she's like, "Oh, the Buddha statue will have to go. I'm non-denomination. The Buddha statue will have to go." And it was going to be a good price, but I knew that if I sold to her, the community would hate her. And so I literally stopped it, and I just stopped the selling process. I was like, okay, you are not it needs to be the right fit for this. I gave birth to this place. I need to sell it on to somebody that's going to keep what we've created, this amazing community. And it ended up being one of my instructors that didn't want to lose the community. I'm imagining that that's quite a familiar scenario.
It is. And that's, I think it's an ideal scenario
Yeah.
for the exact reason that you just laid out. It's, you want someone who's connected and attached to your community to continue it in the manner that it's been existing. It's nobody who has a gentle yoga studio wants someone to come in and turn it into a hot power studio, and vice versa. Um, the reality is that you're lucky to have had that choice.
Yeah.
A lot of times sellers don't have that choice, and it's just whoever's willing to pay you enough to make it make sense. Um, but yes, it's people from the community, teachers in particular, sometimes it's clients, always make for the best prospective buyers. There's one issue that we constantly run into with that, and that's that most yoga teachers don't have, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
sitting around to buy a studio with. And so that goes into one of the other things that inevitably I always end up talking about, which are seller carry notes, which is to say that a lot of times these deals get structured in a way where, let's say the purchase price of a studio is $50,000 and a teacher's buying it, but she's only got 10. They'll put that 10,000 down and then pay the seller the other 40,000 in monthly installments over the
That's what
next.
I did. Yeah. So I did, and it was an ideal scenario for taking a couple of years off. But
Which is great if
yeah.
it works.
Okay.
The problem is everyone who I know who was in the scenario when COVID hit stopped getting paid. And so for someone who financed a big chunk of a deal, like one was 180 of $270,000.
Oh yeah.
And they haven't gotten a dollar in over a year, because the space was closed. It's in California. California's been especially strict on small businesses in a really hurtful way. And so you run risk when you agree to a seller carry note, because you're making your payment contingent on the performance of your buyer. And sometimes people don't make great owners. And even if it's somebody that you really like, who's a good person, doesn't do great with running the business, and so they don't make enough to make the payments. And there's very little recourse, because it's, if they had something that you could go after, they would have used it to buy the studio. Like if somebody owns a home or something like that, they can borrow against their home to buy the studio. But, it's very rare to get some kind of significant collateral in a seller carry note.
So what would your solution to be to do the loan through the bank?
If you can.
Yeah.
But it's always just a question of options. It's pretty rare for yoga studios to be pre-approved for an SBA loan.
Oh, okay.
It's not common. I've only done 2 deals that had SBA loans attached to them, and they were the 2 biggest deals I've ever done, because the buyer only needs 10% of the cash, which makes for a great investment. And SBA is doing amazing stuff right now. They're covering the first 6 payments for free. They're usually 10-year loans. That's literally 5% off your purchase price for free from SBA, which is an amazing incentive. But if you can get pre-approved for that, you'll have a lot more offers.
Right. What do you think? So speaking of COVID, it's weird times right now for starting, buying, selling studios. But I know when I'm walking around right now, when I go on my walks, there is a lot of places for lease, and I know there's one area close to where I live where there's no yoga studios around me, and I keep looking at this place, going, "Oh my God, that would make the perfect yoga studio! Good parking, great location." And then I go, "Stop, Michael! You've done this before. Just help other people." But so imagine that right now for getting leases, it probably is pretty good.
Totally depends.
Yeah.
I've got people, I'm lucky. I'm able to work all over the country. And so, I've done deals from Boston to Maui. And it's always very different, and every landlord situation is very different too. For example, like you're right. I think in general, it should be a pretty good time to negotiate with landlords.
Right.
That's a rational thought. Sometimes landlords aren't rational people, or they have a different motivation, or reason to want different things. And so, as an example, like I've got a landlord who is trying to refinance the building for himself. And so he needs every dollar of rent that he's getting to stay consistent so that the bank approves his refi, which
Right.
means he can't negotiate at all. And so he's been strict as can be, and the tenants are all really suffering, but their interests are not aligned.
Right.
And so basically what he's saying is like, you can just stick with me for a year till I get this refinanced. I'll hook you up then. And to somebody who's not making any money because of COVID right now, they hear that and they're like, that doesn't help me at all. Like, what do you?
Yeah.
So it depends. In general,
Yeah.
landlords are one of the most difficult parts of everything that I do.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that because I know, well, I had a very difficult landlady, very, very tough, but I kind of stuck it out because I had a great rate, a great location, beautiful 100-year-old building. Um, at the end, when I was selling, though, the my lease was due in about 4 months, and I knew throughout having a lease that it always felt like a noose. Like the lease was always just, you were just bound by that lease. Um, so what I ended up doing was I kind of didn't want to get in the middle of, I needed to just sort of end my time in that lease. So I ended up just hooking the potential new buyer directly with the landlady. Again, I didn't have a broker, but I let them kind of work everything out before a deal was made.
Which you have to,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
because no
yeah,
no buyer would come in with only four
yeah,
months of certainty.
yeah, yeah. Um,
But it's great that they were able to work it out and come
yeah,
to an agreement. And that's, I think in general it's pretty safe to say that most landlords want tenants to stay in place. And so if you're thinking about leaving, they would much rather you sell to someone else who's just going to keep it going.
yeah,
Um, Vacancies are the bane of landlords' existence. So um, they should be at the table and accommodating. The truth is that everybody in this country is hurting in different ways right
yeah,
now. And one of the things that I've really come to believe and practice is that it's tough, but landlords are people too. And they can be really hurting right now. And
yeah,
so if you approach them with some understanding that even if their interests aren't aligned with yours, but you treat them kindly, um, you'll get more of that in return. And so
yeah,
I'm a big fan of not ragging on landlords
yeah,
too much anyway, but really trying to work with them because you need their support to do a deal like this. You have to have the landlord's support. There's no way
yeah,
around it. And so, the ideal scenario is it's just a lease assignment where the buyer comes in and effectively just takes over your lease. It's like a one-page paper that says, Mitch is taking over for Michael, and all the terms are exactly the same. But if you're reaching the end of the lease, obviously you have to figure out what comes next. Um,
hmm
and then liability, like you said, it's the noose around your neck. It's the biggest liability any
huge.
yoga studio has because years of rent, if you default on it, can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, um, it's really tough. And one of the things that I always recommend, there's this one specific clause in every lease on assignment and subletting. And I would encourage every single studio owner to go and read that little paragraph in their lease. It's usually towards the end. And it starts out with something that says like, you cannot assign this to someone else. Like I have to approve it. But there's usually language in there that sort of lays out how it's supposed to work if you sell your business.
Okay.
And so the most common is that, the buyer has to apply and the landlord has to approve. And that's sort of the basic parts of it. A lot of times I'll see some really restrictive language though. And the thing that I'm always most afraid of is one specific sentence that says, despite assigning the lease, the seller slash owner will remain liable for the duration of the lease.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
so what they're just trying to keep the original personal guarantee and add a second personal guarantee.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to sell your business, like that defeats the whole purpose. You're like, I want out of this
You are out.
liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's good to know if you've got that in your lease to be aware of it. And then, especially if you're going to extend your lease or sign a new lease, then maybe that's something that you can negotiate out, and just tell your landlord that that's dumb and not acceptable.
Yeah.
The whole point of selling is to get out of that liability. So
Yeah. One of the pricing structure within, a yoga studio, you talked a lot on the training about changing the pricing structure of punch passes and memberships, and I know that was a big thing for me when I built my business. Was I had tons of punch passes, 25 passes, 50 couples passes, and I had two consultants come in and help my studio, and the first one was on pricing, and she just looked at it and went, "You have way too many liabilities on there." And so I don't think a lot of businesses think about their punch passes as being liabilities. And so what we mean by that is that when you go to sell your business, that money is owed back to the clients, right? And so that, or when you can build that into the selling process, that the new owner assumes those liabilities.
it can go a couple different ways. It's definitely a variable. I wouldn't say necessarily that it has to be that way. I personally am of the mindset that when we do evaluation for a studio, it's based on cash flow and income. It's not based on balance sheet stuff, which is
Okay.
assets and liabilities. Um, and so for me, when I do evaluation that a studio made $100,000 last year, general rule of thumb, just simple starting point is just multiply it by two. Two is the most normal multiplier that we use in this industry. It can go up and go down, but that's just a good starting point. But if the studio made $100,000 last year, I'm going to say that studio is worth $200,000. Maybe they have a bunch of outstanding class packs, but those are also current customers and
Yeah.
people who are going to keep coming back to use those class packs and talking about it and telling friends. And, it's, to me, I personally don't think that they should really be included. I've seen it go both ways. Most common is that there's some sort of negotiation around it, depending on
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
exactly it was sold. And so, like, the one that comes to mind the most is if you're one of those people that sells an annual, like a
Yeah. Yeah.
prepaid annual for like $750 or something like that,
Yeah.
and you run a sale of those like the week before you sell your studio, which is incredibly shisty, and I don't recommend it. I would fully expect that to be a credit for the buyer,
Right.
because that buyer is going to service that guest for the whole full year,
Yeah.
and should get that money. For someone who's on a 10-pack and has 3 or 4 classes left, like, I don't really think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
matters.
Well,
And so what we usually do is end up kind of negotiating, but there is that, what's the report called in Mind Body? It's outstanding series report.
right.
And you can run that and it'll actually tally up everything that's
Yeah.
outstanding, and there can be some pretty intimidating numbers on there. I've
Yeah.
definitely seen some 6-digit
Well, my
outstanding.
strategy was to minimize those pass. So I literally cut all of those out except for a 10 class pass, and I got rid of all of them. But then I focused on the monthly membership, and I have to say that saved my business and built it to be profitable, and also gave me peace of mind that I knew that on the 1st and the 15th of the month, I had this much coming in that was going to cover my bills. It was going to cover the instructors, the lease, and all of that stuff. So I think that was probably the best strategy I had. And then to be able to pass that on. But during that period, also I put systems in place. And so when I sold the business, I think that that was a massive asset to being able to sell the business, because I was able to hand over a complete operation manual. This is how the business is run. Everything, hiring manuals, operation manuals, um, just all the systems, so that when the person took it over, it was just seamless. I did build in 6 months of my time as well to support the new studio owner afterwards. But just how important are those systems and sort of goodwill that you do in the community and your brand? How important are those when it comes to selling?
Incredibly important. I mean, in goodwill as a tax code word is usually 90% of the value of a business
Yeah,
and of a yoga studio specifically. Um, there's very little equipment to speak of: blocks, bolsters, blankets,
yeah,
mats, maybe a desk and a computer, like not a
yep,
whole lot else.
yeah, and a
And
Buddha
so
statue.
yeah, and a Buddha statue, which is definitely staying. Um, and so it usually is like goodwill as a category, and taxes usually comprises the majority of the value of the business.
Yeah,
Um, that's obviously slightly different meaning, I think, than you're saying, like the goodwill of the brand and the community.
yeah,
Um, but they're all very much intertwined, right? And so, your brand recognition, how many clients you have, your member list, your total email list, all of that stuff is your reviews on Google or Yelp or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
are all really important.
It's
I
it
want to
make
get back to one other thing that you said real
Yeah,
quick. You said you had 6 months where you assisted with transition, and that's
yeah,
incredibly generous.
yeah,
Um, More normal, I would say, is between 2 weeks and a month.
yeah,
Um, Knowing you, I'm not surprised. You're an incredibly
yeah,
generous and kind person. Um, and I think truthfully, as most people who, it's your baby and you care, you want to make sure that it goes well and the transition goes well. And tip my hat to that. But um, that is 6 months is a long time. Usually I'd try to
well, yeah,
cap it at like a month and then get you paid for the other
well,
5 if needed. But
yeah, and I am, yeah, it is. It, it felt like the right thing to do, because the new owner didn't have kind of the skill set that I had in as far as marketing and what have you. I also still teach there, and I'm connected to the community, but there is a downside to it, and that is things are not done the way you did things. And so it can be really, really, really hard to still be in there and watch it kind of not be done the way that you did things. Yeah.
oh yeah, to put it
Yeah.
mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
So
honestly, like, I've seen a lot of drama between buyers and sellers after the sale.
yeah.
And what I've come to find is that the seller doesn't enjoy watching somebody else do things wrong with their business, you know? And the buyer doesn't enjoy having the seller around because they can't make it their own,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so if you've got a client who's mad about something and they're going complaining about it to the previous owner, there just gets to be this like negative energy. And so i
Yeah.
i usually in, encourage sellers to step away.
Yeah.
I really think
I
it's the best
probably
for
would.
everybody.
So just kind of wrapping things up, it's we're in weird times right now. So thoughts around buying and selling in 2021. Where are things at? Is it a good time to buy? Um, and is it a good time to sell? Or even start? Like, just any thoughts around now with it being a not so normal time?
I think it's a great time to buy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I have for a while, actually. Even going back a few months. I wrote an article a few months ago for Mind Body about why now is a great time to buy. The people who are selling right now, at this moment in particular, as compared to like a year ago, um, they're selling because they're done,
Yeah.
and they just can't, they don't
Exhausted.
have the stomach to start a new chapter of this business. They're looking at reopening, maybe, like in California, everything's reopening right now. And they're just completely overwhelmed at the thought of starting a fourth iteration of this business,
Hybrid business now, right?
Yeah, totally. And for a lot, especially like I would say an older yoga studio owner who's not interested in the technology side of stuff so much, or the digital side of stuff, that it's just overwhelming and gross, and
Yeah.
they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and but the reality is that when we do valuations on business, it's based on income usually, and the last year, pretty much across the board, has devastated the yoga, fitness, wellness industry. And it's just been brutal, and I feel terrible for everyone in the industry, because it's no one really did anything wrong. It's
Hmm.
this thing came along, and it just wrecked everything. And so I always just I just always want to say I'm sorry to all of
Yeah.
the owners out there
I've
that this
Yep.
happened,
Yeah.
because it really is brutal. But the reality is that we're coming out of it now, and things are opening up, and people need their health and wellness more than they've ever needed it before. That feeling of community, being able to give people hugs, the stuff that's been missing so badly for the last year. I
Mm.
feel very strongly, and I feel like I've seen enough data from places like MindBody, that this industry is going to come back 100, 110%. And the reality is that it's going to come back with a lot less competition, because of how many
Yeah.
businesses closed or went out of business. And so
Yeah.
for the ones that made it through, they're going to come out stronger on the other side. They're going to have a bigger chunk of market share. And if they can get after it, they've got some real growth potential ahead of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm bullish on the future, and prices are still low. And so for me, that's a great time to buy.
Yeah.
If somebody was looking at selling, I would encourage them to probably wait until after the springtime. I feel like fall will start to get numbers back to where they're supposed to be, and then hopefully, January, February, March, that big kickoff to the beginning of the year, will look the same, and March of 22 will look like March of 19. And at that point, valuation should be back where they were, but with
Yeah.
fewer businesses, would be a great time to sell.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I always like, I'm very much on the geeky side of things, so I do want to ask you a couple of fun questions. And first one is favorite business go-to app or software or website? What do you use? Um, what helps you run your business? What do you?
Oh man, there's so many, but the one that I just started recently that really changed my life is Calendly.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just being able to email somebody a link and be like, book a call whenever you want, instead of
Yeah.
the back and forth of, how about Tuesday at 4? Oh no, that's too far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the
Uh,
fact that it syncs up with your calendar, so you can actually block off times in your calendar anyway, right? And yeah, that's been a huge asset to my business too. And they've
changed my
rocked that in
life.
the last year. Yeah, absolutely. What about a fun? What's a go-to escapism fun kind of app, website, anything?
Um, for fun, Group Me
Oh,
is
okay.
a group
Yeah,
chat
yeah,
text
yeah,
messaging app like WhatsApp or Slack
yeah.
to a certain degree, just not that professional. Um, and I'm very lucky that a group of my friends from college and shortly thereafter, um, have these like couple little chat rooms that we
Okay.
manage to stay in touch on a very regular basis. And over a time like this past year, it's been priceless, because
Yeah.
when you don't have that physical connection, at least having a strong virtual connection really supported me, and kept me
Yeah.
from losing it with all the
Yeah,
craziness.
I agree. And even on the business side of things, a lot of the peer-to-peer support communities like the Mind Body ones and those places where people could go and hang out and share with each other. And I do think that the people that were involved in, if anybody's not sure, Mind Body is for Mind Body. Mind Body One is for Mind Body customers, and it's a peer-to-peer support group. So it's not really Mind Body employees in there. It's mostly peer to peer. But what I saw there at the beginning of COVID was everybody came together and said, don't cancel your memberships. Don't don't shut everything down. Like that community just rallied around to say, no, if we all stick together and stay strong and keep, asking our members to still support us. And that's what kind of happened in that community. So I think that those peer-to-peer chats are very powerful.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same. We just need support, and if
Yeah.
the only place we can find it right now is in virtual places, and it is increasingly
Yeah.
true that that's how it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it really is. They're wonderful, and I would encourage anyone who's listening, if you're not familiar with Mind Body One, please go on there and check it out. It really is people like Michael and I who I should be on there more, but it's people who are genuinely there to help.
Yeah. Yeah. How do people find you, Mitch?
Uh, my my website is on the screen right there. That's
It's
probably the
it's going to be
easiest way.
audio as well, so.
It's, in that case, I will read it. It is healthandwellnessbusinessbroker.com. My email address is mitch@fcbb for firstchoicebusinessbrokers.com. And my phone number is 404-272-9108. Feel free to call or text.
And they can
That's
book a
about it.
Calendly appointment with you.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time here, Mitch. I really appreciate it. And
It's my pleasure. Thanks for
yeah,
having me.
all right, we'll have you back again.
All right.
Thanks, Mitch.
Take care.
This series is brought to you by my brand spanking new free online business community, also called Yoga Biz Camp. It's a space dedicated to supporting yoga businesses with free resources, free monthly fireside question and answers time with myself. If you're ready to join the next generation of Yoga Biz champs, hop on over to yogabizcamp.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our podcast. It really helps us out a lot. Thanks a million.